There is a very clear and relatively simple plan to play a good game of chess, and in this video I'm gonna share with you absolutely everything you need to know to be able to play it, as well as show you exactly how to do that in practice. What's up, chess player, and welcome to this Journey to Grandmaster, the place where you can improve absolutely every single aspect of your chess game. Today's video is all about strategy. We are gonna play this game together. I'm gonna explain all of my decisions in the process, playing chess for like 20 years, getting to the international master title. I'm gonna tell you, share with you all of my thoughts, and of course help you to understand what is essential during a real chess game. So we are playing the Sicilian defense. Every single time I play it, something absolutely crazy happens. I'm 100% sure this is not an exception. So my opponent plays knight to c3, which is called a closed Sicilian, one of the possible variations here. Knight f3 is the open one. And of course, black has also different options. I like to play here a6 immediately, because I'm just asking my opponent a question: do you allow me to play b5 immediately and grab as much space on the queen side as humanly possible? Then I want to place my bishop on b7, because just a monster here along the long diagonal. My opponent also places the bishop here along this diagonal, because, well, to have some opponents. And yeah, now I need to develop some pieces over here. There are also different setups. I can try e6 and d5, I can try d6 and knight f6, and probably 7, something like that, double fianchetto. Yeah, the problem with the planned e6 and d5, we are talking about strategy, right, is that strategically it's a huge risk. If my opponent plays something like knight to 2, I play d5, he just exchanges, let's say, and then plays d4, then my bishop might be so stuck there on b7, being very passive, just blocked by this pawn, no ideas at all. Whereas this bishop is gonna constantly put pressure on this d5 pawn, and it's not going to be convenient for me. Only if I can somehow make sure that my knight is there on e4, then it's going to be a different story. But there might be also a different page to it. Like if I play e6 and d5, my opponent plays e5 and then plays d4. So everything would be absolutely blocked. And so I'm not going to have any chances there. So let me play d6. Let me try a different plan here. I expect the move knight to e2, because if he plays knight to f3, I can just play b4, and then e4 pawn is in trouble. So of course, even if you are focused on the strategy, then sometimes there might be some tactical issues you absolutely must take into account. So yeah, I'm gonna try this double fianchetto plan with knight f6, bishop to g7, castles, and then, well, trying to apply some pressure on the center. I just need to be careful with this e5 idea sooner or later, because that would attack my knight, and then imagine I take this bishop, but the rook is already on e1, he's gonna take my knight over here, and the bishop is hanging, so I might risk losing a piece there. You should be careful with such things, but when we are gonna approach such a situation, of course, we are gonna think what happens after e5. It's, by the way, essential, no matter which time control you play, no matter who your opponent is. Every time you make a move, think about what your opponent can do, and always think about your opponent's opportunities. You never play alone. That's one of the most important chess principles I hope you know and use in every single one of your games. If not, definitely start doing it from this point, because it's essential. How do you think about your opponent's opportunities? Well, just as you think about yours. Checks, captures, and threats. Those are the most active opportunities there are in every single chess position. So you always think, whenever your opponent makes a move, okay, what is the idea of his move? What does he want to achieve? Does he threaten to give any checks? Does he threaten to take something? Does he threaten to attack something? So that should be the questions on your agenda, and the same way you think about your opportunities. Okay, his move d3, for example, in this case is not dangerous for me, but do I have any checks? Can I capture something? can I attack something? For example, right now I don't still have any opportunity to give a check. I cannot really capture anything apart from this e4 pawn, but that would be a huge mistake. But I can attack this knight. I can play b4 and attack it immediately. I'm just not sure I need to do it. So of course, once you see those opportunities, the next step is to calculate the variations, think what your opponent is gonna do afterwards, and whether it's beneficial for you or not. Imagine how cool it would be to play chess without ever having opening troubles again. What if I told you I could teach you all openings you will ever need in just 10 days? You get lifetime access to more than 110 pure value video tutorials, almost 100 practical tasks to apply your knowledge immediately into practice, 30 plus bonus videos to dive 10 times deeper, as well as private community where all questions you might ever have are answered daily. Get a $200 limited time discount with the link in the description and forget about all opening pain once and for all. So I'm gonna just fianchetto my second bishop so far. I guess on g7 it's going to be very active, and then I'm gonna decide what to do with the knight. That's, by the way, a very good tip. So if you're sure about where a certain piece should go, then you can develop it first. For example, I'm sure my bishop should go to g7, but I'm not sure whether the knight should go to f6 or e7. So I start with the bishop, and then when I see what my opponent is doing, then it's going to be simpler for me to understand what to do next. For example, my opponent is playing d4, and that plays a huge role, because I guess now I would be forced to play knight f6. If I don't take the pawn on d4, my opponent is gonna play d5, and that would be detrimental for my bishop on b7. Once again, it's going to be completely stuck. It's going to be good for the second bishop, but yeah, he's controlling the entire center. I don't like it. So I plan just to take it here on d4, queen takes, so I don't have time, unfortunately, for bishop to g7, but I can just play knight f6. e5 is still not an idea because the bishop on g2 is hanging, and then the rook is hanging, and that's going to be the case for the next few moves. So I still have time for bishop g7, and then even some discover attacks. Either immediately knight h5 or castles. Then I'm gonna protect my bishop on g7 with the king, and then some knight g4, knight e4 would become an idea. So I hope this plan is going to work. One thing I haven't really tackled is knight to d5 idea, but I guess once again I'm in time to deal with that, because after knight d5 I have bishop g7. If he wants to take, I can take it back with the tempo. And once again, e5 is not a problem because of the bishop on g2. Okay, he just plays a3, which feels like a slow move. Like normally in the development you need to focus on three things. Development is like the key, the most important one, develop all of your pieces. The second one is the center. Center is the most important part of the board. You need to always pay attention to it. This is the small center, this is the big center where all of the most important actions are going to happen. And then the third one is the king's safety. Those are three goals, three objectives you should be focused on in the opening. Everything else is a distraction. Like this move a3. You only make those a3, h3 kind of moves when it's really useful for you. Otherwise, you are not wasting time with it, because the goal is, of course, to do all of those three things as fast as possible, especially develop every single one of your pieces, just inviting everybody to the party. So I don't feel like a3 is necessarily a useful move. Like, yeah, in general, controlling the b4 square is fine, but right now it wasn't a threat, and I guess it was more important to finish the kingside development and bring the king to the center. Because notice, this king is completely naked now, and if I get the opportunity to somehow get to it, it's going to be in big trouble. By the way, I had the opportunity to play knight c6 immediately with the tempo attack and the queen, but that would block my bishop, and I don't really want to do it for now. That would make some e5 ideas interesting for my opponent. I don't feel that is the necessary step. I rather want to, create that discover attack against the queen. That's why my opponent plays queen to d3. And now, I agree that a3 move is somewhat useful because b4 is not really possible. Although, b4 also has some disadvantages. The knight can go to d5. Okay, so let me castle. See what's gonna happen. Now he can even play knight to f3 because he has enough defenders for the pawn on e4, and b4 is not possible. But I can bring my second knight all the way to c5, where it's going to be yeah, a huge piece attacking the queen, coming with a tempo, attacking the e4 pawn. That would be a dream for me. And that, by the way, would conclude my minor pieces development. You normally always want to develop your minor pieces first, which are the bishops and the knights, and then you want to develop your major pieces, the queen and the rooks. Not the other way around. Please remember it, especially don't develop your queen too early because it might get attacked, just as my opponent did here. First of all, it was on d4. You might see, well, the queen is in the center of the board. That's very active, gonna do a lot of stuff, but actually it just gets in the way and can easily be attacked. That's why you don't want to do that. Instead, you want to develop your minor pieces there because they can help you, especially if the center is opened. Like here, I would call it semi-opened or semi-closed if you want. But here, pieces play a major role. If the center is completely closed, then it's rather the pawns. You are trying to create some breakthroughs with the pawns and so on. But here, it's very difficult to imagine because you're going to just create too many weaknesses. And using the center, your opponent is going to use those weaknesses and punish you for that. Okay, my opponent plays bishop e3, also finishing the development. Still, knight c5 is a legitimate opportunity for me. He's basically forced to take it, not to lose. Then I'm going to get a pair of bishops, which is generally great, especially in the open position. But I assume my opponent's idea is to play e5 and completely shut this bishop down, after the exchange. And then say that, okay, you have a pair of bishops, but this bishop is absolutely useless, so you can't really enjoy your advantage. I'm not sure. That's quite double-edged. I guess I can start with queen to c7. By the way, developing yet a new piece, there is a golden rule, one piece, one move. Every single one of your pieces should just make one move, ideally in the best case scenario, to make sure that you develop all of them as fast as possible. And of course, at the same time, you should also try to find the most active square for each of your pieces, so that not only it's developed, but it's also very useful for you. So for example, this bishop on b7, this is just a hilarious piece, so useful, attacking, putting pressure on this e4 pawn as well as the entire diagonal there, very inconvenient for white. Just as this bishop might be if the knight is going to go forward, the whole diagonal is going to open up. That wouldn't be very nice for white. Yeah, I guess my opponent played h3 to cover this g4 square, because knight g4 might be annoying for him. For example, he wants to castle, but then knight g4 and you don't have bishop g1 square, something like that. But once again, it's kind of a slow move. The king is still in the center. I have completely finished my development except for the rooks. So I'm ready to play knight c5. And then after takes, I might choose whether I want to take with the queen to make sure that castles is not possible and my pawn is still there to prevent the e5 pawn, or at least make it not so dangerous. Or I want to take with the pawn immediately, opening up the d file and then getting the control of it, winning yet another tempo. I'm not sure what is better, but in every case, I don't see any reason not to play knight c5. Before we proceed, I just want to mention that you can get a completely free 30-day study chess plan. Link would be in the description, that goes so perfectly aligned with what we are talking about in the strategic tips. You're going to become such a stronger chess player if you complete this challenge. On top of that, you get a completely free private Q&A with me, so that you can ask all of your questions, so that I can help you to accelerate your chess growth even more. All you need to do to get all of that is to complete a very quick survey. It would take like 10 minutes of your time to help me with my master thesis project, which is all about chess. So you're gonna even learn a useful chess topic in the process. Thank you very much for doing it. It means the world to me. Okay, my opponent takes it. He literally had no choice. If he loses the central e4 pawn, that's going to be a nightmare. I like taking with the queen more, because it's making it more difficult for him to finish his development. And the queen is very active, and I'm ready to support it with the rook as well. Maybe later on I could even remaneuver my knight, my second knight, to c5, because that's a nice square for it. And also open up the bishop. Or maybe remaneuver it to c4 over here, still with the same idea because, well, the knight is really blocking the bishop, limiting its potential. So now we are kind of reaching middle game. Well, at least I am, because I more or less finished my development, whereas my opponent is still in the opening, trying to decide what to do with this king. Because if you castle alongside, the king also is not going to be that safe there. I'm just completely ready to play b4, or maybe prepare it with a5 and put a lot of pressure on the king. There I have my rooks potentially going here. So of course my strategy would depend on what my opponent is going to do with the king. But that's basically how you build that strategy. You first of all consider the position, like what is your strengths, what are your weaknesses, and the same for your opponent. King's safety plays a huge role here. If you see that your opponent's king is pretty vulnerable, then of course you build your strategy around that. You try to understand what is the right plan to explore that weakness and attack the king, in this case, create some threats against it. Of course, it depends on the pawn structure as well. Like I said, if the center is completely closed and shut down, then you're thinking about pawn breakthroughs. But here, the center is pretty open, so you rather don't want to play with your pawns, only like in case of castles, to once again open up the position even more and get to the king. But otherwise, you're rather thinking about maneuvering your pieces, improving its position, and attack your opponent with your pieces. That's a very important difference to understand. By the way, another idea I just noticed is just to play knight h5. That might be very annoying for my opponent, because the pawn on g3 is hanging. You cannot really move it because the f4 pawn is hanging, and you cannot allow to lose it. Otherwise, it's very inconvenient to protect it. The king cannot do that. Only the queen can do it if the knight goes away, but you don't really have a good square for the knight to go. It can go to the desired d4 square because my bishop would be open. That's another advantage of the move knight to h5. And the bishop is just a monster. So something like knight d2 has to be played, but it's already a move back. Every time your opponent has to go back, you're kind of happy about it. Yes, my knight on h5, if like this threat won't be that dangerous, also might be not that useful, but well, I might create new threats, like play rook c8 and attack that knight on c3 three times, just threatening to take that and win a pawn, and then basically the entire position collapses for white. So every time you go forward and create threats, and your opponent has to go back and protect, that's a very good indication that that might be a very good thing for you to do, especially if it's a so-called multi-purpose move. This is a type of moves I always recommend you try doing, like this knight h5. It both attacks those pawns and opening up the bishop. So one move does a lot of good things for you simultaneously. Sometimes two good things, sometimes even more if it somehow connects all of your pieces together, creates a lot of different threads. This is always something you should be aiming for. Just as an example, knight a8 would be also opening up the bishop, but it wouldn't create this second thread simultaneously, which of course makes the whole difference. Try to look for those moves in your own games. My opponent is taking a long thought because, yeah, I guess the opening didn't work out for him. He lost the two bishops advantage. He definitely is way too slow with his development. And yeah, he didn't really achieve anything significant. Yeah, he plays knight d2, preventing that idea, kind of, or mitigating the risk, let's say, because the pawn would be already protected, and maybe this knight is going to be 3 there with a tempo, and I'm kind of not in time to play knight h5 and rook c8 to create that threat. So if I play knight h5 now, he plays knight to b3. Then if I go away with the queen, I'm no longer attacking the knight. If I take the knight, then he takes with the pawn. I mean, that should be still better for me, but not that clear. Like if I play queen c4, for example, an interesting idea, he can take, I take, and that would be great because I still attack the g3 pawn, but he has this move knight to a5 is a double attack in response. So once again, importance of thinking what your opponent can do, not just saying that, okay, knight h5 is a good move, let me make it. No, what your opponent can do, especially thinking about his last move, what is the idea behind that move? I assume that is to move the knight to b3. Because if he removes my queen from the diagonal, then he can just castle. Okay, well, I'm gonna just continue with the plan of developing all of the pieces, just bring the rook to c8 for now and see what's gonna happen, because in every case, this rook is going to be very useful along the c file. I see no reason not to do that. And even in terms of those knight a5 ideas, if that's gonna be possible, I'm gonna have the a8 square for the bishop. So once again, in some nature, that's a double purpose move, multi-purpose move. Those pawns in the center, if you're gonna ask me whether we want to push it, I'm gonna say not really, because if you push that pawn, that would block this bishop, and weaken the d5 square. If you push that pawn, either immediately or after preparation, that would block this bishop and maybe potentially both of them. Your opponent plays e5 and then you're completely stuck. So be very careful with pawn moves, because you can never take it back. Okay, my opponent plays bishop f3. That is quite a smart idea, because now he completely stops my knight h5 plan, and he doesn't care about the g3 pawn being hanging after all, because yeah, the h5 square is covered. Okay, then maybe I should just come with my second plan here, knight d7, opening up the bishop, attacking the bishop. And the knight, I could remaneuver it somewhere here, or maybe to c5. h5, h4 is another idea, but somehow it doesn't feel that fast and strong, because he's gonna play g4, and I haven't achieved anything special. Okay, do I have any ideas except for knight to d7? I can play rook fd8 just to complete my development with all of the pieces, and then maybe play d5. But once again, e5, the bishops are blocked. I can play knight e4. I really don't like to give him that opportunity. Like, yeah, I understand the knight on e4 is going to be a huge, huge piece. And if he takes, basically he's losing a piece. So that actually makes sense. Castles, I'm still prepared to attack somewhere here. He cannot castle there. If he plays knight b3, then maybe my move doesn't really help, because knight d7 creates an immediate threat. The knight on c3 is under attack. What does he do about it? If the knight goes away, then I'm gonna just grab the pawn on b2, which is also very important. Also move with a tempo attacking the rook, so that's not great news. Even if he plays knight b3, I can just take it, win a pawn. That should be good enough. What is his idea after knight d7? Maybe to play e5, because if I take, then this knight would be hanging. By the way, from this perspective, rook d8 makes a lot of sense. So knight d7, e5. I can take there. Must take with the knight to maintain this pin there. Can I sacrifice a piece? Queen takes. Rook d8. The queen almost don't have any squares. Yeah, maybe. Wait, queen g4 is also not... No, queen g4 is a move because the knight is no longer there. But what I just noticed, I'm gonna have queen e3 check, which would win the knight back on the spot. So that's not a problem. No, I feel like it's time for knight d7, because sometimes if you have that development advantage, you should understand that it's not going to be there forever. You must use it, otherwise it's gonna disappear. That's exactly the case with this one. If I allow my opponent to somehow stabilize the situation, complete his development, then my advantage is gone, because the material is equal. So I need to act right now. I kind of feel this moment, and every time you're gonna have your development finished and your opponent is still having the king in the center, the pieces are still not on desirable squares, you shouldn't understand, you should feel this is your moment. This is your golden opportunity to use that and materialize it somehow, get something out of it. So this is exactly what I'm doing here. And like I said, I don't see a good way to deal with it. Yeah, he plays knight b3, but I'm just taking... This is a full extra pawn. I don't see any compensation whatsoever. The c2 pawn is going to be hanging. This is a disaster outcome of the opening, and this is how you should play the Sicilian defense. Please use this recipe in your games, and you can outplay such a strong player. I mean, he's almost 2300 rated here. and we seemingly outplayed him very easily. I mean, the game is not over. Still, now we have got the advantage. We need to convert it into a full point, and that's a completely different type of a problem. They say the most difficult thing is to win the winning position. I feel like he's making it easier for me though, because he's taken voluntarily, and now I'm just having another double attack. C2 pawn is horribly weak, even if you play bishop d1 to protect it. The g3 pawn is weak. The e4 pawn, by the way, is also weak. So he's doing it completely the wrong way. Maybe he was afraid because the only way to save the c2 pawn was to play king to d1. But at least he's not losing anything on the spot. And here it feels like he is. And of course, I'm ready to bring the last piece. No matter what happens, no matter how much extra material you have, you always want to bring all of your pieces to the game. Okay, our opponent just resigns, realizing it's move 19 and he's completely lost, hopeless position. He can't do anything, so it's time to stop. If you would like to know how to outplay your opponent in such a fashion as white, in this video I'm doing just that, explaining you every single step in the process, so you're gonna definitely learn so much. Take a look at it.